Hello, everyone. Welcome to the third episode of Truth Tracker, which is a podcast dedicated to combating misinformation among various political topics in the political sphere of America. Today we are going to be doing episode 3 of this podcast, and it's going to be focused on voting. And so, first off, before we get into the episode, I just wanted to thank everyone for supporting the last two episodes and helping or supporting the channel and the podcast as we launch up our platform. I really appreciate everyone supporting. Once again, I encourage everyone to subscribe, and turn on post notifications. That would definitely mean a lot. I'd also encourage you to send this to your friends and family, as it's super beneficial for all of us. And I really appreciate every single person who's watched my video or watched the last two episodes. I really, really appreciate every single one of you all. And yeah, thank you so much for your support. And so today, our episode 3 is going to be on voting, and it's going to kind of work the exact same way as the last two episodes, where we're going to bust 10 myths regarding voting, voter fraud, election integrity, election security, and everything under that kind of realm. And at the end, we're going to be tackling civic engagement. And so, yeah, other than that, there's nothing much new to report here. I really appreciate everyone's support, and yeah, let's just get into the episode right now. So, our first myth for today is that voter fraud is rampant and widespread. Now, research consistently demonstrates that voter fraud of a widespread scale is extremely rare in the United States of America. There are several studies and reports and investigations that confirm that instances of voter fraud do not significantly impact election outcomes. And, just to cite some examples, there was a study done by the Brennan Center for Justice, and they found that the incidence of voter fraud was between 0.0003% and 0.0025%, which indicates that it's a very low occurrence rate among elections in America. And furthermore, to add on another example, the National Association of Secretaries of State, which is essentially a group of the Secretaries of State for each respective state in America, those people, they end up overseeing elections within their respective states. This association of those secretaries of states report that voter fraud is a minimal issue and does not substantiate claims of widespread fraud. And there's also been numerous investigations done by law enforcement, news media, and election oversight commissions that have found no evidence of large scale voter fraud that affects election results. Now, it is true that voter fraud, occurs. It's very hard to, make sure an election is 100% secure. There's always going to be something that happens. But when it happens, it's typically limited first off to very small and isolated incidents rather than a systematic abuse. Now, so all this kind of underscores that the electoral system and the election system in America is secure from fraud, and that voter fraud is not rampant and not widespread. The second myth for today is that voter ID laws prevent fraud and are necessary. Now, this myth is kind of rested on the belief that voter ID laws are intended to prevent fraud, but they're often based on the assumption that fraud is this kind of widespread problem that affects America on a systematic scale. Research shows that voter ID laws, first off, tend to disproportionately affect minority, elderly, and low-income voters, which often prevent these groups from obtaining the necessary identification to exercise their fundamental right to vote and participate in our democracy. There's also been numerous studies done in states that have voter ID laws that show that voter ID laws can suppress turnout among the groups stated above or the groups stated previously, and without providing significant improvements in fraud prevention. For example, the National Conference of State Legislatures highlights that states with very strict voter ID laws often see a decrease in voter participation, which is not good for a democracy. And like I said in the previous myth, the incidence of voter fraud remains low even in the absence of strict voter ID requirements, and so therefore the benefits that voter ID laws provide in terms of fraud prevention are not supported by substantial evidence. And we've gotten all this information in the last two myths from the Brennan Center of Justice, the National Conference of State Legislatures, as well as the National Association of secretaries of state. So these are all very reputable reputable organizations that have accurate and verifiable information. And so, yeah, therefore, this myth is not true, as voter ID laws don't prevent fraud, as they don't provide any fraud protection. They actually decrease voter turnout, and they're also not necessary, as voter fraud is not occurring on a widespread or a systematic scale. The third myth for today is that absentee voting is more prone to fraud. Now, absentee voting is conducted with rigorous safeguards to ensure its security and integrity, but first it's important to define what absentee voting means. So absentee voting is essentially any form of voting that does not occur at the exact polling location. So this can mean, you vote by mail, or this is also what military members that are serving overseas use to vote. They'll mail in their ballots. And so that's essentially what absentee voting is. And there's many safeguards to ensure its security and integrity. For example, states that use absentee voting have implemented measures like signature matching, ID verification, and secure ballot processing to prevent any fraud that may occur. Multiple studies have also shown that absentee voting does not present a higher risk of fraud compared to in-person voting. For instance, to cite an example, the U.S. Election Assistance Commission provides evidence that absentee ballots are actually subjected to the exact same integrity as in-person ballots. And systems for processing absentee ballots include, multiple layers of security like tracking, auditing, in order to ensure, or tracking and auditing to ensure that every ballot is legitimate and accurately counted. So that way there's no any type of fraud at all. So that way, therefore, this myth is not true, and absentee voting is not more prone to fraud. And in fact, it's a very secure way to vote. And we got all this information from the U.S. Election Assistance Commission. Our fourth myth is that voting machines can be easily hacked and change votes. Now, I guess in theory, no technology is immune to potential threats. However, voting machines are protected by strict and stringent security protocols. For example, voting machines undergo comprehensive testing and certification by independent bodies to ensure that they meet strict security standards. Furthermore, election officials also employ multiple layers of security, encryption, and routine audits to safeguard the integrity of voting machines. The Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, otherwise known as CISA, oversees and supports efforts to secure election infrastructure such as voting machines, and they also provide guidelines in how to prevent voting machines from being hacked or other threats. And we got this information from the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. And all this information proves again that voting machines are super reliable, and they have tons of security protocols that prevent them from being hacked and forcing them to change the votes of the people. Our fifth myth today that will be busted is that early voting is unsafe and prone to errors. Now, early voting is a very well-regulated process that has happened numerous times in the past and is a very secure process with numerous safeguards. It's very similar to the security protocols are very similar to absentee voting, as many states have implemented strict procedures with early voting to ensure accuracy, security, such as secure ballot storage and the careful management of the voting process during early voting. There's also been research done in the past that shows that early voting does not increase the risk of errors or fraud at all, and that early voting is done under the same regulations and laws and oversight and integrity measures as those used on election day. And furthermore, early voting is widely used and trusted by voters, which kind of shows its effectiveness and its reliability and the confidence that people have in it to ensure secure and accurate election processes. And so therefore, this myth is not true, as early voting is very safe and is not prone to errors at all. And we got this information from the Election Assistance Commission. Our next myth is that voting by mail is less secure than voting in person. Now, voting by mail is literally just as secure as in-person voting, as voting by mail actually has several key security measures in place, such as ballot security that includes signature verification, ballot tracking, and secure storage. Ballots that have or mail-in ballots have also been subject to thorough verification processes to confirm the identity of the voter and the legitimacy of the ballot. And so these measures kind of include comparing signatures and verifying voter information. And studies and audits in the past have shown that mail-in voting systems are very secure and the integrity of mail-in ballots are well protected by the same standards applied to in-person voting on election day or in early voting. And we got this information from the National Vote at Home Institute, which is a very reputable organization, again, that produces tons of verifiable, accurate, and correct information. So again, these are all the sources that we've been using in this episode are accurate and kind of reflect the way that you should be tackling misinformation. Whenever you find a certain piece of information through the media, you should always be cross-checking it to other sources. That way you can determine if it's accurate or not. And so, therefore, this myth is not true, as voting by mail is just as secure as voting in person. Our next myth is that election results are manipulated by secret algorithms in voting machines. Now, this idea that election results are manipulated by, these secret programs and algorithms in voting machines is just simply not true, because like we said before, voting machines they undergo extensive testing and are very, very secure, and election commissions ensure that the voting machines are met with strict security and accuracy standards, and there are many testing laboratories and government agencies that are involved in this process of election security. Furthermore, after elections, many jurisdictions also do verification checks and post-election audits to verify the accuracy of the vote counts, and so these audits involve actually manually checking a sample of the ballots against the machine counts to confirm that the machines are reporting results correctly. And also, voting machines are strictly watched, and the software that's used in voting machines is reviewed by multiple independent entities to ensure that there's no, hidden manipulations or whatnot. And there's also never been any credible evidence that secret algorithms are used to alter the election results. And so, therefore, this myth is simply not true. We got all this information from the Election Assistance Commission, and there's just no information. There's no evidence that proves that this myth is correct. So, therefore, election results it just simply isn't true. Election results are not manipulated by secret algorithms in voting machines. Our next myth is that voting machines can be hacked remotely to alter election outcomes. This kind of ties into the previous myth, as it is a valid security issue, but voting machines are protected with several layers of protection. For example, on election day, they are kept under strict physical security, which includes secure storage and transport protocols. Voting machines also use encryption and security protocols to protect data. They also ensure that any attempt to alter or tamper with data would be detected and dealt with by the respective authorities within the jurisdiction. There's also an uncommon fact about this is that there's many regular security assessments and penetration testing into voting machines that's done by government agencies in order to address potential vulnerabilities, and this just improves the security of voting machines even more. And there's also never been any evidence of widespread hacking in the past, and which therefore proves that voting machines are a very secure way to conduct elections. And so this myth is simply not true. Voting machines cannot be hacked remotely to alter election outcomes. And we got this information from the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency within the United States of America. Our next myth is that election officials can alter the results after votes are cast. Now, in theory, this is possible. However, the integrity of election results is maintained through, strict and rigorous protocols and checks, such as, for example, after votes are cast, they are counted and recorded, according to very strict and secure measures. Any alteration of results would require just breaching multiple security layers, which is highly unlikely due to the safeguards that are put in this process of counting ballots. Furthermore, election results often have many audits done on them after elections to ensure their accuracy, and so that helps ensure that the election results are accurate. Furthermore, the election process or the counting process is subject to legal oversight and scrutiny, and which helps ensure that there is a or that election officials are acting in a very are acting in a legal manner and are not altering the results after votes are cast at all. Furthermore, election officials also just have a very just a defined and a limited role to alter results. Their actions are governed by laws and regulations that prevent them from changing ballots or whatnot. So therefore, you know, election official the laws that or the laws that create the role for election officials are often designed to ensure transparency and prevent tampering. And we got all this information from the Brennan Center for Justice. And so therefore this myth simply again is not true. Election officials cannot alter the results after votes are cast. Our next myth is that the election observers, and this is the final myth for today, the election observers can easily manipulate the results. So this kind of ties in again, to the last one, but this is kind of more broad, but simply put, again, election observers play a crucial role in maintaining the transparency and ensuring the integrity of the election process. Election observers, simply put, are just there to monitor and report on the election process, such as the handling and counting of ballots and, the overall conducting of voting procedures. And again, they do not have the authority whatsoever to alter or influence the results. They are simply just there to ensure that procedures are followed correctly and to report any issues or irregularities that they spot. And their presence at voting places ensures their transparency and accountability in the overall election process within the United States of America. And the activities of election observers are regulated by law, and there's regulations put in place to make sure that they do not interfere with the counting or reporting of votes. Simply put, election observers are just there to witness and document the process, and they're not actually involved in the decision making or the results or any result manipulation within election or within the overall election body. And we got this information from the United States Election Assistance Commission. And so therefore, all this information proves that this myth is not true, as election observers cannot manipulate the results whatsoever. And that is it for today's myths out today. We busted tons of myths regarding voting fraud, voter fraud, mail-in ballots, absentee voting, election integrity, election security, voting machines, and everything that falls under that realm of voting. I hope everyone gained tons of information and knowledge regarding this field now. And finally, again, this part of our episode has become kind of a tradition that we do now. We always have a part dedicated to civic engagement and voting. So once again, we encourage everyone that's voting or everyone that's here to be voting. It's our civic responsibility, and it's one that we are trusted with in order to vote. It allows us to bring about policies that we believe in and that we want to strive for to create a better America. And it's super important, and it's a way to honor the people that have sacrificed their lives for our nation by honoring the rights that they fought for us and making sure that we use our basic responsibilities within the democracy to vote, and therefore this helps us honor the people that have sacrificed their lives for this nation. And it's our job to make sure that their memories and legacies do not go forgotten. So it's very important for us to vote. And like I said, voting again, it allows us to hold elected officials accountable. It allows us to bring about change. It allows us to affect our local communities on a positive level. And so as you can see, through all these reasons, voting is super, super important, and I would urge everyone to vote. No matter what you believe in or whichever candidate you support, please vote in the November 2024 election. It's super important that you do. And yeah, that concludes our civic engagement segment for today's episode. I really appreciate everyone tuning in to episode 3 of the Truth Tracker podcast. Once again, make sure please like this episode if you enjoyed it, subscribe, and turn on post notifications. And thank you for watching, everyone. Goodbye.